John, welcome to the show.
Jonathan, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm thrilled to have you here. I can't wait for you to share what Tennessee as a whole is doing, particularly through Launch Tennessee, the organization you're working with, and hear about some of the cool companies you all are helping along the way. But getting us started, maybe you could share a little bit about your background with everyone.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm actually the new guy in Tennessee. I keep saying that. It's already been half a year, but I actually moved down from New York City to Nashville about 6 months ago. So I'd spent the last actually 7 years with an early stage venture capital firm, actually called Launch Capital. So
Okay.
I guess only places with launch in their title will hire me. But yeah, so it was a early stage VC. We wrote 150K to 300K type checks. We had offices in San Francisco, New York, Boston, and Connecticut as well. So I was doing everything from sourcing deal flow, doing due diligence, working with our portfolio companies, really helping them connect to additional investors, business development opportunities, all those kind of things, and really try to add value as a firm. So what was interesting about us, though, is that we were actually spun out of an extremely wealthy family office. So we were an evergreen fund that was an extension. We wrote small checks in a lot of different companies, so tech and life science. So we were in over 150 portfolio companies over the course of about 8 years, then also had the ability to follow on down the road via the family office. So it was a really sort of interesting setup. It's probably atypical to most sort of traditional funds that raise X amount of money through many LPs. We had a single LP. So it was a great situation. And actually what was funny was so part of our thesis over the last couple of years, as we were situated on the coast, the valuations had just skyrocketed and gotten frankly out of hand for companies that really didn't have much. We're raising at $5, $6, $7 million type pre-monies out of the gate. Part of our thesis was really around actively looking at secondary markets for more specific opportunities or better opportunities, and got in touch with Charlie Brock, who's Launch Tennessee CEO, and Jason Denenberg, who I actually took over for in the Director of Capital Formation role here. So gotten to know them over the last 3 years or so, came down to 3686 the last 2 years, and really got exposure to what was happening in Tennessee and got really excited about it. So it was an interesting opportunity to kind of continue to leverage what I had built in New York, but also, I don't want to say ground floor because I think there's been tons of groundwork laid in Tennessee, but really at the beginning of I think, over the next 10 years, a really exciting opportunity. So that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, so it's not ground floor, you're right, but I would say it's at an inflection point, which is part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then obviously it intrigued you. So great start, great background. Couple of questions out of that, if I could. Sure. What was your college education?
Yeah, so I went to Middlebury College, so it was funny. So I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida, so obviously had a soft spot for the Southeast, and actually that was kind of the reason. As we were actively looking in secondary markets, I kind of gravitated toward what was happening down here. Really Nashville and Atlanta were the two cities I think that kind of really popped up on the radar, as I was doing some exploratory stuff. But was born and raised in Jacksonville through high school, went to Middlebury College up in Vermont, actually moved to San Francisco after college, and this was now in end of 2008 when everyone was on a hiring freeze and it was a complete disaster. Market had melted down. And that's kind of how I caught on with Launch Capital, originally just part-time, kind of doing some side projects for them. Was coaching high school baseball in the afternoons, trying to make it work out in San Francisco. And then, eventually 20 hours came 40 hours, came full-time, and really kind of developed my own role out there. And then in 2012 was when actually I made the move. Partly, my wife also went to, my now wife also went to New York. So that had a big part of the move there, but really had the opportunity to open up our office in New York City. We were kind of covering New York from New Haven, Connecticut. So that's kind of how I ended up there. And then Nashville after, so it got about 6 months ago now. So.
Yeah, so hopefully you're enjoying it. And so for the folks who don't know what Launch Tennessee is, could you just give kind of the 60-second on
Sure.
what the organization is and does?
Yeah, so Launch Tennessee is actually a public-private partnership with the state. We're technically a nonprofit. That's right around 75%, 80% funded by ECD, which is the Economic and Community Development side of state government. So the majority of our funds come from the state, although the other sort of 20 to 25% is raised through sponsorships, through ticket sales at 3686. So a lot of different ways we kind of are funded. And then really our key focus is on fostering entrepreneurship in Tennessee, really raising the bar, raising the profile, and providing as many resources as we can to entrepreneurs here. So everything from funding and running entrepreneur centers, our 10 Accelerator program. We do manage a $30 million insight fund, so have some access to capital. We put on 3686 to try to bring outside investors down to Nashville.
Right, and that's coming up in May, isn't it, or something like that?
So June. Yeah,
sorry,
so June. Yeah, June 5th and 6th is when we're having it down in Nashville. This year we're excited. So Steve Case from AOL and Revolution Ventures is headlining.
Cool.
We also have Senator Bill Frist, Fred Smith from FedEx also just recently joined on. So we've got a bunch of great people coming this year. We had over 170 investors from all over the country come last year. And what we do is take actually 36 companies from all over the Southeast and bring them all to Nashville. Really, and it's totally free, all expenses paid for the startups. We don't like the pay-to-play model at all.
Awesome.
So we give them the opportunity to actually, this year will be a $50,000 prize sponsored by FedEx, which we'll be making those announcements over the next few days. But really excited to get more and more exposure to what's going on down here.
Okay, so and then you mentioned the Accelerator program, and you just
Sure.
not too long ago announced a couple of companies in that, correct? And I think
Yep.
a few of, or at least the interviews have been recorded. Maybe Alicia's came out, I guess, this week. So Alicia with Avrio, I believe they're
Yep.
in. So what other companies are in the Accelerator program right now?
Yeah, perfect. So just give you kind of a quick framework on that. So basically, this year or every year, we have something called the 10 Accelerator, which takes 8 companies from all over the state. So we usually they've participated in some version of our programming. So whether that be through an entrepreneur center, they were at Village 36, 3686. They have participated in one of our accelerators at a lower level across the state. So they've all kind of come up through some version of our programming to be eligible for the 10.
Mm-hmm.
So this year we had, so we chose 8 companies, again, three Knoxville. So that was actually
That's cool.
Speaking of, as the winner. So Grow Bioplastics, Avrio Analytics, and Mom Source Networks as well.
Okay.
With the three Knoxville.
Courtney Jones, right?
Courtney Jones, which we're extremely excited about. A few in Nashville, so Utilize Health.
Yes, Jessica, she's coming out next week, I think it is.
Well, fantastic. Well, she's got an unbelievable story.
It is a great story.
And fantastic as well. Also Everly, which is a all natural beverage mix company that's based here in Nashville as well. So in Chattanooga, we have Roots Rated, who's been around a few years, doing sort of their content marketing for the outdoor travel space. Who am I missing here? And Sweet Bio, also out of Memphis. So they are working on a dental membrane. So for dentists to help when you actually lose a tooth, to help prevent or infection and promote healing. So
very, very cool, John. What I notice about it is, number one, and I'm sure part of it's deliberate, but you do go with the best candidates, is that you're across the state. You got some Memphis, Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville, so you're kind of in the major cities. And then it sounds like, I mean, if I'm wrong, but it's not one of those accelerators where it's like, oh, you need to be tech, or oh, you need to be this. It's like, you have a good idea, we're going to help you get your business going. Would that be true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think of it as sort of, at almost like graduate level, for really companies across the state. So that's the idea, is that we are industry agnostic. We've got a mix of SaaS companies, of e-commerce companies, of medical device, healthcare IT, and big data analytics. So we really actually, this year really have run the gamut on industry. It's totally a blind judging vote. So we bring in 20 or so judges to review applications, they give us feedback. We rank based off that feedback, and then select the top 8 that come out of it. And what the most exciting thing is this year is 50% of our cohort is actually made up of female founders, which we are extremely excited about.
That's awesome. Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah, really trying to add some sort of diversity to the tech scene. I know a lot of folks have been sort of down these days on some stories like Uber coming out and others around diversity and things. And so that's just kind of how it played out. I mean, it was really just a quality vote, and we're just excited to continue to promote female entrepreneurship as well.
That's fantastic. Curious how you all manage the cohort when you've got them spread all over the place. Yep. Is it a lot of things like this, a lot of virtual training?
Yeah, great question. So basically how it's structured is the virtual accelerator. So each company stays in their hometown. Usually once or twice a month, they all come to Nashville. We usually set up about 2 days worth of really immersive learning days that typically fall around a certain topic. So everything from sales and marketing to fundraising strategy to culture, really kind of hiring, all those types of topics. It's a really immersive few days. So that's one aspect. The other major aspects is we have a great network of master mentors from all over the state, where we try to match companies based off the right fit of the background of those mentors to help them sort of point them in the right direction. So we provide those networks. I actually meet with them virtually every week. We do office hours, half hour to really check in, figure out where sort of we can help out, and then really try to make also business development introductions where we can, given sort of the statewide network as an organization. So we do a lot of different things, and that's really just the programmatic part. The other big part of the program is the roadshow. So about a month ago or so, we actually just we did a 4-day, 5-city, 7-event tour on a bus all across Tennessee. Really gave each company the chance to pitch, get more exposure, really showcase what they're doing. And each company had a set of asks that they all had, which could be easy enough as introduce me to your dentist, all the way to, I'm looking for funding. So it was a great, a great way to showcase kind of what they were doing. And then also too, a few weeks ago, we went out to San Francisco as part of the program to do companies that were fundraising, to do really direct investor meetings out there. And actually next week we head to New York for the same type of deal.
So interesting thought there. Bear with me as I flesh this out for a second. But someone who doesn't understand how maybe these accelerators and things work might hear the idea that it's launched Tennessee, your accelerator, Tennessee companies, but yet you just said you're taking them out to California.
Absolutely.
Could you explain, for those who may not understand, why those type things happen? It's beyond just a networking, which is valuable in and of itself, but could you just go into that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reality is, in Tennessee, and I'm a big believer in what's happening moving forward. Is the reality is that we are a magnitude smaller in terms of capital dollars invested. That's just kind of our reality.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, and we are doing as many things as possible as an organization to help raise that number up. And actually, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I know since Launch Tennessee started in 2013, I think the invested dollars into Tennessee-based companies from venture capital, I think it was sub $50 million investments, has increased over 100%. So I mean, we're doing something right in terms of growing the pot here locally. That being said, the majority of the capital is on the coast, and that's just typically where the investor dollars are. It is what it is, and what we're really trying to do is get more exposure to those investors of what's happening down here. I think that's just sort of a natural way to kind of go about things, and quite frankly, kind of coming from the other side, and I'm happy to jump into this a little bit later, but just my sort of not having been to Nashville, not having been to Tennessee, my natural sort of perception of what was happening here, based in New York, was that, well, I'm sure there's some cool things happening, probably a little bit lower quality, and that was kind of what I thought. Until I really got down here and was like, oh my God, there are some amazing companies. And they're quite
you're preaching to the choir. Yeah. That's, again, not to be too selfish, but that's why the Southbound Podcast exists, is because there are so many people who had no idea anything about us in the first place, but then even if they do, preconceived notions, and there is a ton of stuff going down here. Quick story, I remember someone asking me when I was in my first startup, they were out of New York, and they said, well, what goes on down there? And I said, well, not that this is necessarily a thing you want to talk a lot about, but I said, do you remember the atomic bombs? So yes, those were done 20 minutes from where I live. We have tons of innovation going on here, tons of it, and it's something people just miss easily. So it's wonderful that people like myself and with the podcast, and then you all are just doing your best to sort of push it out there and say, hey, we may not be at the level of Silicon Valley, but we're doing pretty good with what we're doing.
Yeah, and a little bit more color on that too. I'm a big believer in sort of the next wave of innovation around specific enabling technologies that we're starting to see. So everything from self-driving cars to drones, IoT, 3D printing. Those are technologies that aren't disrupting the same way that sort of mobile did, or SaaS or e-commerce. That affected the industries that were really based on the coast. I mean, the stuff that's coming out now is going to affect transportation logistics. So if you're a transportation logistics startup in San Francisco, all your customers are based here. Agriculture, everything, manufacturing, automotive, these are all sort of quote unquote unsexy industries. But the next wave of innovation is going to happen in these markets, and I think that there's huge room for secondary markets all around Tennessee and the Southeast to kind of emerge support that.
That's way better than I could ever bother doing it. So I may have to snip that out and play it for people over and over, John.
All good. I've probably said it about 1,000 times now, so I'm getting better at it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that will be a good springboard to move into why do business down here in the first place. I mean, you talked about it in your email to me, and I've written a blog post about it before. There's reasons that doing business down here makes sense. Could you go into some of those?
Yeah, I mean, again, jumping off, first thing, again, just what I mentioned in terms of, having those big sort of industries that are based here, the major players that become customers, and we're trying to do more around actually getting them to become investors or supporters of innovation. Someone like a Service Master in Memphis is opening up a 10,000 square foot innovation center in addition to their corporate or their campus, and really helping to, and they also have a VC arm that is trying to invest now in sort of local startups. So really trying to get those corporations to reinvest those dollars. And so that's a little bit of a side, but the other big things, for me, having both lived in San Francisco, and I was in San Francisco really before it had just skyrocketed and got so insane. So I was like 2009 through 11, and really starting about 12 was when things just got out of hand. And then made the move to New York, which is the only more expensive market,
right?
Which I think has now been passed by San Francisco. But so the big things for me is just I don't see that being sustainable. And if you're in Silicon Valley and your median house is now over $1 million, like the amount of money and capital you have to raise to get 12 to 18 months is just is harder. The other big thing for me is just talent. I mean, granted, again, there's tons of talent there. But actually, the turnover is a real big problem for companies.
And I imagine you're fighting for it harder, right?
Oh, you're fighting harder. What you're fighting also is perception. So if there's the next hot startup that's all over TechCrunch, people jump ship. Things are starting to go kind of sideways here. It's time for me to leave. Or Facebook and Google is sitting there poaching their engineers, and paying them 10 times what you can pay them. So it's a tough place to build a company. It's a tough place to create loyalty, I think. Whereas here, that's the exact opposite. I think, companies, cost of living, all of that, you don't have to necessarily raise as much to go further, which is a good thing, especially if you're an early stage company trying to figure it out, and really trying to figure out what product market fit is and really start to scale that way. And then, again, talent and folks, when you do land it, finding talent anywhere is hard, but if you do find people, there's usually a much bigger buy-in on what you're doing. They're willing to stay. Their families are based here. Those kind of things. And really, I think there's all the other ingredients are really here. You just mentioned Oak Ridge, but, the talent around Vandy, or I guess I should say UT first.
Vandy too.
In Knoxville. But, Vandy, Oak Ridge National Lab, we have enough institutions here that I think can provide a lot of that talent or research or, commercialization technologies that start to spin off startups. The other finding too is there's a ton of money down here. That was actually an interesting finding for me, was that there's plenty of money. It's just there's a perception or investors here tend to be a little bit more conservative, I would say, in a lot of ways. Or maybe they just haven't really had any experience investing in startups. They've typically worked through the wealth managers. They don't really know how to go about sourcing deal flow. They don't know how to do due diligence. They don't maybe understand sort of the risk profile of investing in an early stage startup, knowing that your money is probably going to be locked up for years.
Right.
And it might be a zero. I mean, that's the reality of startups, is that they fail. So really trying to do a lot of different, but, and I do want to say too, the other finding was that that all being said, wealthy individuals in Tennessee are more than willing to give to nonprofits. They're like per capita. So I heard somewhere, one of the highest in the country given to churches and hospitals and, nonprofits. So we're trying to do things, where can we kind of bridge those gaps? And we've talked a lot about impact investing, and, is there a sort of a bridge of companies that are certainly for profit, looking to make a return, but also do good in some different ways, environmental or local impact or whatever, however you want to define that. Are there ways where we could bridge that gap to some degree, or, just a lot of different ideas to really help. Angel tax credit, I do want to plug quickly, just a program that launched Tennessee spearheaded that provides a 33% tax credit to individual angel investors who invest directly into a company in Tennessee. So basically what we're saying there is, can we de-risk your investment, 33%? Essentially, you're not going to zero, so that at least takes some of the risk out of it. and provide tax credits to help encourage those people to get off the sidelines. So a lot of different kind of moving parts.
And that's in play now? Is that in play now?
Yeah, that is in play now. So that just started January 1st, actually.
All right.
So we're excited. We've got about $3 million worth of credits to issue this year, and I think the latest total, we were just over 400 in credits issued, which means I think it was somewhere around like $1.1 million of new investment that's gone into companies.
All because of that new.
I mean, it certainly encouraged other folks. I can't say it's all because of it, but actually there was one case where we've been told anecdotally that an investor was kind of on the sidelines, and he was like, "Well, it kind of gave him that nudge to get him over the hurdle."
Yeah, so I can see that where it's people. It wouldn't necessarily convince someone who's never thought about it to do it, but if they're like, maybe I will, maybe I won't. It's just one more thing to encourage them to jump in and get involved.
Yeah, and we hope companies go apply on our website, launchtn.org/ATC. And you basically go in as a company, you pre-qualify. It's a very easy process, and then hopefully, as you're going out to fundraise, you can kind of use that as a carrot to investors and say, "Hey, we're a pre-qualified company, and we qualify for this." So, and the one last thing I do want to mention, just about Tennessee in general, and compared to the coast, there's just and I'm from Jacksonville. I remember the Southern hospitality piece of this, but I've only been here 6 months, and almost everyone I've met has said, "Oh my God, like you need to meet so and so, you need to connect with so and so." Has made many introductions. Just the community and the willingness to help, I think, is now having come from New York. I would say
a little different. Yeah,
people hold their relationships close to their vest, and don't want to give those away. So I think, just as a state in general, and just how people are in general, I think will help sort of get the wheel rolling and create a more vibrant ecosystem. Just people that want to help, and that's it's a great thing.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing those things. How do in your mind do we improve that and keep that ball rolling? Is it just a matter of time for us to get further along and more experienced in this process? Is that truly all it is, or?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think I touched on a little bit, but. It is tougher to raise money here. I mean, that's a reality. Particularly if you're trying to raise a couple $100,000 to really get off the ground. I think a lot of the angel groups tend to act almost more like Series A type investors more than sort of the traditional angel groups. So there's things that we want to do, to help encourage investment. And the reality is we don't want a smart UT person that has a great idea, starting a company, and then graduating into an environment where they can't really raise money and leave.
Yeah,
we've got to do a better job of keeping those people here, and then providing them the resources they need to succeed, and hopefully they create the next business that creates hundreds of jobs in Tennessee. So that's the idea, and that's the one small gap in just keeping people here and retaining talent. I mentioned a little bit on the investors, but I think the part, what we also need to do is get everybody kind of pulling in the same direction. There's a as a statewide organization, we touch and we see a lot of different ECs and groups that are working on these kind of things, and sometimes they're a bit just disjointed. Or
I don't know, but sometimes I might jump in here and get my soapbox out and say all the time.
yeah. And that's just again sort of the brief time I've been here. It's if a EC in Nashville or is actually working together with Knoxville EC, if someone needs a mentor in 3D printing in Nashville that they don't have access to, they need to be talking to Knoxville and really kind of banding together more as a state, because again the reality is that without no single city in Tennessee is going to compete with the San Francisco. But as a group, as a whole, suddenly you're much more impactful and can do some cool things. So that's one area I think. Yeah,
that's great insight. I would tell you that of all the wonderful things you've shared about this area and why it makes sense to do business here, that you really hit on it just then. I think the one thing that we still struggle with as a community, and it's been like this for as long as I've been involved, and you can see the gray. It's been a while. Is that we do have these organizations that either go out and try and recreate their wheel that's already being done well somewhere else, or everybody kind of runs around and does their own thing. And I get that to an extent because everyone has to justify grant dollars, et cetera, et cetera. But we need to be better as as a community, of as friendly as we are, figuring out how we can be more collaborative to push some of these startups forward faster than they are.
Absolutely. And And yeah, I mean, again, we're working on a lot of those types of things. We have another one of our initiatives is our mentor networks that we've set up specifically around specific verticals. So, for example, we have something called life science networks that helps companies in life science that are looking for mentors and advisors that to help go through a regulatory process. They don't really know who to reach out to. So we're trying to build those types of things that really kind of bring people across the state and really kind of help those companies succeed. So we're definitely pulling, and we just got to get everybody on the same page. I think that's a good first step.
Well, I think you guys have a good shot at being one of the ones, if not the one, that really helps push that forward and get that done. So, starting to wrap up a little bit here, can you give me an idea what's next on the plate for Launch GM? But we talked about the conference coming up in June. What else is going on initiative-wise that we might see coming in the near future?
Yeah, so the 10 actually wraps up. So our finale is on March 29th here in Nashville. So that'll be the finale. Megan Barry, the Nashville mayor, will be headlining that and kicking it off. It'll be a great. So it's sort of the finale is actually there'll be a $25,000 prize associated with the 10 finale that we'll judge based on progress. So to try to get everybody on the same playing field, given that we're at different stages, let's say, the judging will be actually done on who's made the most progress in 4 months through the program. So that's coming up quickly in the next couple of weeks. You mentioned 3686 coming up in June. You mentioned the Angel Tax Credit that's live right now, so feel free to apply for that. I mean, the other big initiative for me personally is the Insight Fund, and so basically, kind of what's happened over the last few years is that back in 2012, about $30 million came down from the federal government as part of a larger program called the SSBCI. So each state got a certain allocation. Tennessee got just under $30 million. They set it up as a matching fund. So that fund has been fully invested to date. So there's about 27 active companies in that portfolio that I think, coming from the investor side and managing a portfolio, I thought, okay, in the past, we've really written the check and said, they have their lead investors, they have their board, and kind of said good luck. And I'm like, we got to do a better job of supporting those companies that are in that portfolio that we're invested in, first off. And part of that is selfishly is whatever exits and proceeds that come out of that fund over time. Even though those were federal dollars that came down, ECD gets to keep, and we're an extension of ECD. We're finalizing things right now. Hopefully we get to continue to manage that fund moving forward. And what I'd like to do, and again, this is still early days, and we're hoping this is the next 4 to 5 months, starting to get approvals and board votes and all that, is really create a seed fund to help fix the gap that we talked about a little bit earlier and provide some relief to angel investors. And there would still be a matching component to that, but we'd also sort of have more of a diligence process and an investor committee that can say sort of yes or no, depending on the quality of company. So we're starting to build that out. We've got the framework and proposal for it now. I'd say July, August type of time frame on that front. But those are the kind of things that we're trying to move forward. Granted, we are sort of a public-private organization. There's certain things that we have to do around conflict of interest and making sure that we're, doing all the right things from a public government perspective. But I think it's something that 18 other states have. They have venture develop. I just got off the phone with Maryland Ventures, who has a venture development organization. That's what they're called, kind of quasi-public-private, that do these that have been doing these things for years. So there's other benchmarks out there, and we're kind of doing that, making those calls and figuring out what are best practices to execute on that. So that's the other big thing on the radar.
Awesome. All good stuff. And so if someone wanted to connect with you to either learn more about the company or any of the funds, where's the best place for them to head? Is that the website?
Either the website or just shoot me an email. Okay. I'm more than happy to chat. So it's just John, JOHN, @launchtn.org is my email. Feel free to reach out, because that's one other thing I do want to highlight, because I think the other big thing that we should be working on as a statewide organization is really being that connective tissue across the state and being the facilitator of the right introductions, and whether that's investors or entrepreneurs. So I'm trying to get a good sense of what's happening here, and really we're actually, one other thing I should mention that's still early days, but we're also trying to build out a database that we're kind of framing as 10 Connect right now. That would almost be if you think of like a more in-depth, more focused like pitch book, where we'd have we understand exactly who the investors are in Tennessee. We know exactly what they're looking for. We know sort of the outside investors as well. And then on the other side, we understand who's working on what, what stage what stage they're at, and what they're raising and what they're working on, and then find ways to actually match the right people together.
Yeah.
And so we do that a lot one-off, and we always want to do that, but trying to figure out ways where we can be more efficient and productize that to some degree. So we're working on that. So I love meeting entrepreneurs. I love talking more about, and I'm happy to give feedback, kind of putting the investor hat back on and saying, hey, these are the questions that you're going to be asked. You need to have good answers for XYZ, or here's the holes and all of that. So I'm more than happy to meet, especially now that 10 is kind of winding down. It'll free up some more of my time. But
right.
Happy to do a phone call. I've been trying to meet as many folks as possible. So feel free to reach out.
Well, we're glad you're down here. I hope you're enjoying Nashville. It is a wonderful town, and make your way out to Knoxville and get to enjoy the mountains here sometime. But appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you coming on. Really good stuff.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and all great stuff. I really appreciate what you're doing with the podcast as well. I think these kind of things also I think are certainly necessary for a thriving ecosystem. So really appreciate you spending your time to do this as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Enjoyed it very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Have a great day.
Thank you.